Saint Anthony of Padua, who lived between 1195 to 1231, was a Portuguese Catholic priest and friar of the Franciscan order. He is one of the most revered and beloved saints in the Catholic Church. Anthony was born in Lisbon, Portugal, to a wealthy family. His parents were Vicente Martins and Teresa Paes Tavera. He was baptized as Fernando Martins de Bullos. Anthony studied theology and Latin in Lisbon and later in Coimbra, where he joined the Canons Regular of St. Augustine. In 1220, Anthony was deeply moved by the martyrdom of 5 Franciscan friars who had been killed in Morocco. He became convinced that he too was called to preach the gospel to the world. Anthony joined the Franciscan order, taking the name Anthony, and set sail for Morocco. However, he became ill and was forced to return to Portugal. Anthony settled in Italy, where he became known for his powerful preaching and his ability to explain complex theological concepts in simple terms. He preached against heresy and sin, and his sermons were often accompanied by miracles and healings. Anthony's preaching was so effective that he was nicknamed the Hammer of Heretics. The miracles during his lifetime helped many to receive faith in Holy Trinity and to lead a faithful life in Christianity. St. Anthony's Miracles. Sermon to the Fishes. St. Anthony loved to preach and tell people about God's love. One day, St. Anthony went to a town called Rimini to preach to the people. But when he got there, he found that the people weren't interested in listening to him. They were busy with their daily activities and didn't care about what he had to say. St. Anthony was sad and didn't know what to do. He decided to go to the nearby river. As he stood by the river, he began to preach to the fish. "My dear fish," he said, "you are so lucky to be living in this beautiful river. You have plenty of food to eat and clean water to swim in. But do you know who created this wonderful world for you?" The fish started to gather around him. They swam closer and closer, as if they were listening to his every word. The people of the town saw this amazing sight and were shocked. They apologized to St. Anthony for not listening to him, and asked him to preach to them. Miracle of the Mule. In 1226, in the town of Trecastagni, Sicily, a mule was starved for 3 days by its owner, Farina. The mule was then presented with a pile of food and a consecrated host. The mule ignored the food and knelt before the host, recognizing the presence of Christ. Restoration of a severed foot. In 1231, in the city of Padua, Italy, a young man named Leonardo dei Vergelli cut off his own foot in a fit of rage. Anthony prayed over the severed foot, and it was miraculously reattached. Leonardo was so grateful that he became a friar and spent the rest of his life serving Anthony. The Miracle of Aliardino's Glass. A long time ago, in a city called Padua, there lived a knight named Aliardino. He was a strong and brave knight, but he didn't believe in the miracles of St. Anthony. One day, while Aliardino was having dinner with some friends, they started talking about the amazing things St. Anthony could do. They told stories of how he helped people in need and performed incredible miracles. Aliardino laughed and said, "I don't believe any of those stories. If St. Anthony is so powerful, then let him prove it." To test St. Anthony's powers, Aliardino picked up his glass and said, "If this glass doesn't break when I throw it on the ground, then I'll believe in St. Anthony's miracles." Aliardino threw the glass down on the hard floor with all his might. Everyone gasped, expecting the glass to shatter into 100 pieces. But the glass didn't break, and the hard tiles on the floor cracked and broke. Everyone was shocked. Aliardino was stunned and couldn't believe his eyes. He realized that St. Anthony's powers were real. From that day on, Aliardino became a true believer in St. Anthony's miracles. He learned to respect and appreciate the power of faith and prayer. The miracle of Parisio's resurrection. A long time ago, in the city of Lisbon, Portugal, there lived a boy named Parisio. One day, he decided to go on a boat trip with some friends, but he didn't tell his parents. As they sailed out to sea, the sea became rough with strong wind and high waves. The boat was tossed around and thrown into the water. When Parisio's parents found out what had happened, they were devastated. His mother ran to the beach and begged the sailors to help her find her son's body. The sailors lowered their nets into the water and pulled out Parisio's lifeless body. Parisio's mother was heartbroken, but she didn't give up hope. She prayed to St. Anthony, asking him to intercede with God to bring her son back to life. She promised that if Parisio were brought back to life, she would dedicate him to the Franciscan order. For 2 days, Parisio's body lay still, but his mother continued to pray. And then, on the 3rd day, in front of his parents and relatives, Parisio suddenly sat up, rubbed his eyes, and looked around. He was alive. Healing of a leper. Anthony healed a leper named Domenico, who had been suffering from the disease for many years. This miracle took place in the town of Rimini, Italy, where Domenico was cured after Anthony prayed over him and touched his afflicted skin. Resurrection of a dead child. Anthony prayed over the body of a dead child named Giovanni, who had drowned in a well in the city of Padua, Italy. Giovanni was miraculously brought back to life, and his parents were overjoyed. Multiplication of bread. Anthony was hosting a large group of friars in the town of Forli, Italy, but there was not enough bread to feed them. He prayed over the bread, and it was miraculously multiplied to feed everyone. This miracle was witnessed by many people, including the Bishop of Forli. Calming of a storm. Anthony was traveling by boat with a group of friars on the Adriatic Sea when a fierce storm arose. He prayed to God, and the storm was miraculously calmed. This miracle saved the lives of everyone on board. The miracle of the missing heart. A long time ago, in a city in Tuscany, a rich man died. Everyone in the city was talking about his fancy funeral. St. Anthony was there, and he wasn't impressed. This man didn't deserve such a big celebration, he said. He was mean to the poor and only cared about his money. Anthony remembered what Jesus had said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be too." And then Anthony said something surprising, "His heart is in his money box." People were curious, so they called a surgeon to open up the dead man's body. The surgeon opened the dead man's body, and he didn't have a heart. Everyone was amazed. Where could his heart be? Later, when the family opened the dead man's treasure chest, they found his heart inside it. It turned out that the rich man had loved his money more than anything else. As a result, he wasn't buried in the fancy tomb he had built for himself. Instead, he was buried in a simple cave by the river. The miracle of the healed wife. A long time ago, in a city in Tuscany, there lived a knight who was very rich and important. But sometimes, he got very angry and did hurtful things. One day, he got so angry with his wife that he hurt her very badly. He said and did mean things to her, and even hurt her with a knife. The people who worked for the knight and his family members were very upset. They helped the wife and put her in her bed. The knight was very sorry for what he had done. He ran to St. Anthony, who was living in the city, and begged him to help his wife. St. Anthony quickly went to the knight's house with him. He kneeled down beside the wife and prayed to God to heal her. And then, the wife, who was almost dead, suddenly sat up and was completely well again. The miracle of the talking baby. A long time ago, there was a nobleman who loved his wife very much. But sometimes, he got very jealous and worried that she might not love him as much as he loved her. When their baby was born, the nobleman got even more jealous. He didn't believe that the baby was really his, even though his wife told him again and again that she had never been with anyone else. The nobleman's wife was very sad and didn't know what to do. So, she went to see St. Anthony, who was known for his wisdom and kindness. St. Anthony talked to the nobleman for a long time, trying to help him see sense. But just when it seemed like the nobleman was starting to understand, the baby was brought into the room, and the nobleman's jealousy came flooding back. St. Anthony knew just what to do. He looked at the baby and said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, speak and tell us who your father is." And then, the baby looked up at the nobleman and said in a clear, strong voice, "That's my daddy." The nobleman was shocked. He realized how foolish he had been to doubt his wife's love. He broke down in tears and hugged his baby. The miracle of Tommy's resurrection. In a small town near a basilica, there lived a family with their 20-month-old boy, Tommy. One day, while his mother went to the basilica, Tommy wandered into the kitchen. He saw a big pot on the fire with boiling water in it. He pulled a stool over and peeked inside. Tommy saw his own reflection in the water and tried to touch it. Unfortunately, he lost his balance and fell into the boiling water. Tommy's mother came back after the sermons at the basilica and was horrified to see her son's feet sticking out of the pot. She rushed over and pulled him out, but it was too late. She screamed for help. The whole neighborhood gathered there, including some friars from the basilica. Seeing the friars, she remembered the miracles done by St. Anthony. She began to pray loudly, asking St. Anthony to help her son to come back and promising to donate his weight in bread to the poor. While the mother was still praying, Tommy arose as if from a deep sleep. The miracle of Eurilia's rescue. A long time ago, in a town called Padua, there lived a little girl named Eurilia. One day, she went with her mom to visit an old lady who lived nearby. While her mom was inside visiting, Eurilia decided to go outside and collect some sticks and twigs for the fire. While she was playing outside, Eurilia slipped and fell into a muddy pond. Her mom didn't know what had happened, but when she came outside, she saw Eurilia floating in the water. She rushed in and pulled her daughter out, but Eurilia wasn't moving. The mom was so sad and scared. She started crying, and people began to gather around. One of the men said, "I'm sorry, but your daughter is gone." But Eurilia's mom didn't give up hope. She prayed to St. Anthony, asking him to please help her daughter. "Oh, St. Anthony, please bring my daughter back to me," she begged. As she prayed, Eurilia started to move. Her lips began to twitch, and she started to cough up the water she had swallowed. As everyone watched, Eurilia slowly came back to life. She started to breathe again, and her body began to warm up. She thanked to St. Anthony's help. Eurilia was alive again. The miracle of justice for Martin. A long time ago, in the city of Lisbon, there lived a kind and gentle man named Martin. He was the father of St. Anthony. There were two families in Lisbon who didn't get along. One day, the son of one of these families did something very bad. He hurt the son of the other family very badly, and the young man died. The person who did this bad thing buried the body in Martin's garden. When the police found the body, they thought Martin had done it. Martin tried to tell them that he didn't do it, but they didn't believe him. He was in big trouble. Meanwhile, St. Anthony was living in a city called Padua, very far from Lisbon. But God told Anthony what was happening to his father. Anthony knew he had to help his father. He asked his friends if he could take a short trip, and they said yes. Then, something amazing happened. Anthony traveled 1,200 miles in just a couple of hours. He arrived in Lisbon and went straight to the court where his father was being judged. Anthony asked the judge to bring the body of the young man who had died. When the body arrived, Anthony spoke to it in a loud, clear voice. "Tell us," he said, "who hurt you?" And then, something incredible happened. The body sat up and started talking. "It was not Martin who hurt me," he said. "It was someone else." Everyone was amazed. They realized that Martin was innocent, and they let him go free. The young man's body then turned to Anthony and asked for forgiveness for his sins. Anthony forgave him, and then the body lay back down and was still. The next day, Anthony was back in Padua, just like he had promised his friends. It was as if he had never left. The miracle of Padua's liberation. A long time ago, in a city called Padua, there was a mean and powerful man named Azelino. He had taken control of the city and was treating the people very badly. The people of Padua were suffering, and they wanted to be free again. They prayed to God and asked St. Anthony, who had died a few years before, to help them. Kind priest named Blessed Luke also prayed to St. Anthony, asking him to help the people of Padua. St. Anthony appeared to 2 friars, including Blessed Luke, and told them that the city would soon be free. He said that the mean Azelino would be driven out, and the people would be able to live in peace again. And that's exactly what happened. In 1256, Azelino's soldiers were forced to leave Padua, and the city was finally free. The people of Padua were overjoyed. They thanked God and St. Anthony for answering their prayers and setting them free. The miracle of Cuniza's healing. A long time ago, when St. Anthony passed away in 1231, thousands of people came to say goodbye to their beloved friend. They loved him because he was kind, wise, and always helped those in need. On the day of his funeral, a woman named Cuniza came to pay her respects. She had been very sick for a year and had a big tumor on her shoulder. She had to use crutches just to walk. When Cuniza arrived at the tomb where St. Anthony was buried, she prayed very hard. And then, something amazing happened. Cuniza felt the tumor on her shoulder start to disappear. She looked down and saw that her skin was smooth and clear again. She was so happy that she threw away her crutches and stood up straight. She cried tears of joy and thanked God and St. Anthony for healing her. This was the very first miracle that happened at St. Anthony's tomb. News of the miracle spread quickly, and soon, many people who were sick or in grief came to visit the tomb, hoping for a miracle of their own. St. Anthony is still helping people today, and that we can always ask for his intercession when we need guidance or healing.